What's up guys, welcome back to another episode of Showdown. Today we're going to be ranking the greatest anime trios from best to worst. Now as you guys can see here, if we take a look at the chart, we have some great anime trios. We have the Demon Slayer trio with Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu. We have Sasuke, Naruto, and Sakura representing from Naruto. We have Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji from One Piece. Eren, Mikasa, and Armin from Attack on Titan. We have Urza, Gray, and Natsu from Fairy Tail. Emma, Norman, and Rei from Promised Neverland. Bakugo, Deku, and Todoroki from My Hero Academia, and to finish it off we have Nobara, Megumi, and Yuji from Jujutsu Kaisen. Now what makes a great anime trio? Now I know this is going to sound really obvious, but you'll be surprised at how many trios fall short of this. One of the main characteristics of a great anime trio is that they have to stay as a trio. They have to be all on the same page. Now if we look back at the chart, there's clearly some trios here that are getting knocked out early. The first one I'm thinking of coming in at rank 8 is going to be the Attack on Titan trio. Now earlier on in the AOT series, you could have had a great argument on why this trio was perfect. I mean, you have Eren representing as a Titan shifter, and then you have Mikasa really being Eren's bodyguard, the best bodyguard of all time. Mikasa was always there for him. She's an Ackerman. She's the greatest out of the trio with the ODM equipment. And then you could talk about Armin having a great strategic mind. He's a great leader. Now I know there may be some Erwin fans out there that may argue that Erwin should have been the one that got saved with the Colossal Titan, not Armin, and I am not a part of that camp. I've said this before and I'll say it again. If you saved Erwin at that time, a lot of the Survey Corps, a lot of the people in there have already lost trust in Erwin. It was the right move to save Armin. I think Armin's great, but once the Jaegerist plan was implemented, this trio fell apart. Eren realized his power, he realized his greatness, and he also realized how badly the Survey Corps needed him to carry out their missions. And because he realized how great he was as a puzzle piece, he took it upon himself to put the entire Eldian population on his back. He tried to play hero ball. He tried to take over everything. I mean, this whole Jaegerist mentality, even though we can kind of understand where he's coming from sentimentally, we also have to understand that Mikasa and Armin were not on the same page. And this is clearly why they're the worst trio here. I mean, there's two different mentalities. There's no balance whatsoever. Eren is the one that's holding all the power. He now has a founding titan. Coming in at rank 7 is none other than Team 7 from Naruto. Clearly one of the worst trios on the chart. Even if you're a Naruto fan, you have to admit it at some point. Now, we understand from a power scaling perspective, they are top tier. I mean, they are the greatest successors to the legendary Sani. Whether it was Orochimaru with Kabuto, or Tsunade with Shizune, or even Jiraiya with Yahiko and Nagato and Konan, everybody that they trained, Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura have become the greatest successors to the legendary Sani. But as a trio, they were trash. They were never really on the same page. You have Sasuke leaving the entire village, going rogue, and then you have Naruto and Sakura doing everything they can to try to bring Sasuke back. Naruto and Sasuke had one of the craziest rivalries in the entire show, so they were never on the same page in that regard. And then you're having Sakura pretending to be in love with Naruto to make him feel better about the situation. Sakura doing this really put them two in an awkward situation. It was just a trash trio all around. And then we can bring up Sai, who actually ended up spending more time on Team 7 than even Sasuke. Yes, they were a great trio back in the Zabuza days, but when you started going towards the end of Naruto Shippuden, it really became one of the worst trios. Not from a power scaling perspective, but from a teamwork perspective. Coming in at number 6, I'm actually gonna go with the Fairy Tail trio. When I'm looking at Urza, Gray, and Natsu, they're not one of the worst trios on this chart, but there's definitely an imbalance in power. When you look at Urza Scarlet, clearly everyone reveres her as Titania. The Fairy Tail Guild really respects her leadership roles, and I don't know how that really worked with a Natsu and Gray, because even though Natsu and Gray had their own rivalry, Urza for the most part was able to shut it down on almost every single occasion and keep those two in check. But there was a moment in time where Natsu actually ended up surpassing Urza in power, and this is where the trio kind of got in a little rocky waters for me. So I will say, because of the power dynamic with the Fairy Tail trio, there were a lot of mishaps, but there was not really too much going on here for me to put them at the very bottom of the chart. Coming in at number 5, I'm going with Deku, Bakugo, and Todoroki from My Hero Academia. This trio I have right in the middle of the chart because I think that as many great things as they have available to them and as much potential as they have available to them, there's also a lot of cons coming as well. You have Deku being pretty much the leader, the strategist of this trio, but Bakugo is not really trying to give up that leadership role to anybody. Todoroki has to be open to using his fire side more, and we saw them training all under Endeavor, and that was one of the greatest times we got to see them really work together. They really tried to set aside their differences, but we do know that because Deku is really the only one willing to compromise in the trio, it kind of makes things tough. Bakugo and Todoroki are a little bit more hard-headed than Deku. They're a little harder to deal with, and this is kind of what makes their trio kind of complicated, because you're having somebody like Bakugo who even got kidnapped. He's clearly stubborn, and we know Todoroki's not the greatest strategist. We've seen his fight with Eraserhead and Momo was clearly leading the front. We know that Deku is not the greatest in terms of controlling his quirk. I would probably give that to Bakugo out of the trio, and they all recognize their weaknesses and their strengths, but Deku is the only one in this trio that's really willing to compromise. Todoroki, we need to see more fire. Bakugo, we need to see you dialing back a little bit and deferring to Deku when it comes to strategy. Coming in at number 4, I'm actually gonna go with the Promised Neverland trio. Now, had this only been season 1 of Promised Neverland that we were discussing, you can make a case that Norman, Emma, and Ray are actually a number 1 or number 2 spot on this chart. But now that we are discussing season 2, which happens to be one of the biggest fumbles in all of anime, but don't even get me started on that, I believe that this trio is actually a rank 4 spot. And let me tell you why. Emma has a passion, she has great emotional intelligence, and because of that, she's a fantastic leader. Ray, on the other hand, is a genius, and so is Norman, but they are geniuses in different aspects. You're having Ray, who's pretty much the intel guy. He's a really great spy, and on the other side, you're having Norman, who is a great strategist. And these characteristics actually made them a great trio. There was balance, but because Norman was shipped out, it changed everything. The way Norman experienced the demons was completely different from how Emma and Ray experienced the demons, and that is what changed the trio forever, because Norman was out there to actually take out the demons and treat the demons how the demons treated him. Now, if Emma and Ray were experimented on like lab rats, like how Norman was experimented on when he was shipped out, would they keep that same energy to protect the demons? Who knows? But all we do know is that Norman is the one that dealt with that, and because he dealt with that, he was willing to go all out against the demons. And this is solely what took them down from a top tier trio, because they had differences in their end goals, and that is what changed the balance of power. That's what changed everything. It became Norman versus Emma and Ray at certain points in Promised Neverland, and that's a no-go. But because they were so great in the beginning, I put them at a higher tier than Team 7, and I also put them at a higher tier than the Attack on Titan trio. Now, when I'm looking at my favorite trio on this entire chart, it's obviously going to be the Monster Trio from One Piece. Obviously, the One Piece bias is coming in, but One Piece fans, we have to remove our pride from this. We have to really look in and say, is this the greatest trio on the chart? No, it is not. We are looking at number 3, the Monster Trio, Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji. Now, when you think of the Monster Trio, Zoro and Sanji obviously have a great rivalry, but they are able to set it aside when it comes to fighting and protecting the Straw Hat crew, so that's good there. That's a pro. Luffy obviously is a great fighter, and he also shows great leadership and confidence, and then you're having Zoro keeping him in check if he needs to. Sanji obviously is able to keep Zoro in check and vice versa, and they are great for each other. But here's the issue. Even though Zoro and Sanji's rivalry has helped them elevate their game to the next level, there are times when Zoro and Sanji cannot really show up for Luffy. Not because they are not loyal to Luffy, not because they are trash, but just because from a power scaling perspective, they are not really there. They're not ready yet. In Zoro's case, was Zoro ready to be Luffy's right-hand man in Dressrosa? The answer is no. Whether it was against Fujitora, where he really bodied Zoro and put him in the dirt, or you have Doflamingo's right-hand man, Trable. He was not ready for either. And this is why Luffy and Law's alliance was really used in this matchup, because Luffy and Law were really the greatest duo of the Dressrosa arc. Sanji, not really from a power scaling perspective, but from a storyline perspective, he took a major L. Now, we understand Sanji's sentiments, right? He was obviously trying to protect the Straw Hat crew, which is why he left in the first place, but we know what it was already. Him doing this move only made things worse. It gave the Germa 66 and the Big Mom army a lot of leverage over the Straw Hat crew when they first arrived at Whole Cake. Either way, we get the sentiment, but there are times, like I said, where Zoro and Sanji have fallen short when it comes to protecting Luffy. Now, does this mean Zoro and Sanji are trash? Absolutely not. Like I said, this is my favorite trio here, and we know that Zoro and Sanji have clearly leveled up in the Wano arc and have gotten even stronger if you're up on the manga. But we also have to understand that because Law is present and because Luffy and Law made an alliance, they were able to make it this far. At number 2, I'm going with the Demon Slayer trio. This trio right here is almost flawless. The only flaw I can think of when it comes to this trio is that I wish Zenitsu can show us how he can box while he's conscious. Because as a trio moving forward from a power scaling perspective, Zenitsu only being able to really box on an elite level when he's sleeping makes things complicated, especially when we're seeing their fight against Daki and Gyutaro. I mean, Zenitsu was really going crazy, but he had to be unconscious in order to do it. I mean, how are you really going to rely on Zenitsu knowing that you don't know how he's going to turn out? Tanjiro brings the reasoning and he's a great strategist, but it does make things complicated not knowing when Zenitsu's going to show up. Now Inosuke is always going to be there, and even though I have him underneath Tanjiro, he's not Tanjiro level, he is still going to give you consistent competitive fervor. He's still going to be great with his beast breathing. Zenitsu is arguably even stronger, but because you don't know when he's going to show up, it's the only thing that makes a trio a little less than perfect. And at number 1, I have to go with the Jujutsu Kaisen trio. This trio is absolutely flawless. You have Megumi with the domain expansion, Megumi showing that he is the version of Sasuke without the toxicity, Nobara really being able to work with not only Megumi in a duo, but also Itadori in a duo. We've seen that against the Cursed Brothers. She is fantastic in that regard. And you're also showing that Yuji can hold his own. Now he has black flashes that he can use consistently. It's ridiculous how balanced this trio out is when you're talking about power scaling, and when you're also talking about just a series in general. They are the version of Naruto's Team 7 if you remove the toxicity. Yeah, they joke around here and there, but when it comes down to working together, they always show up. Not one of them was left behind in any arc, in any fight that I can think of, and that's what makes them the greatest trio here.